Horror is a subjective experience. Those well-versed in its trappings are often looking for the next big scare, something that makes them feel. Sometimes, it's chasing a thing that scared them like when they were younger, and the scariest thing for them off-screen was expected to be finishing homework or getting coal on Christmas. Adults not realizing things are often more sinister. Sometimes it's chasing a scare that makes you feel seen, an exaggerated thing that given shape on screen gives catharsis for your nightmares, or anywhere else it's laughed at or trivialized. And then there's a chase that many horror fans know, the chase to see themselves running. It's stunning that from the safety of one's seat, one could find peace in a genre where many end up deceased, or sometimes worse, erased or betrayed. We tend to place ourselves in fiction. It seems to be the human condition to say, you would have done different. But not everybody gets to see themselves in a pleasing light, blinded by the sight of our own reflection. And media leaves lifelong blind spots sometimes, especially when you don't know you're being reflected. And I suspect that there are some that only saw one like them meet a terrible fate on screen before a certain age, often as a villain, or more charitably, a victim. Times are changing, but when it comes to representation, horror fans will always have the foundation of seeing themselves eviscerated. But on occasion, a story of liberation and struggling through the frustration of living in a world that wants you dead rears its bald head. I've talked at length about horror in a way that my next words could go either way, but as much as horror movies on this channel will eventually have their day, this is a game review. Don't know if the title gave it away. It's one thing to see one like you triumph on screen, effective a million miles away, but to play a game, to participate, is another thing altogether.
Birds of a feather flock together. 2022's An Outcry for PC is a narrative horror RPG. We've seen it in our dreams, figuratively. A poetic game that questions your sanity, with mechanics that mirror the struggles of mental illness. Nothing is new under the sun, but the shades and hues are what makes pursuing fun. Made in RPG Maker 2003, a blast from the past indeed. Quinn K's An Outcry is a tapestry of pixels horror adorable as can be, inspired by games such as Space Funeral, Off, and IB, though seems destined to be in the shadows of Undertale or Amori. This attempt at a masterpiece may just be what you need. Birds of a feather flock together, yes, yes indeed. Its horror is both real and imagined, a magical realism that strokes our brain damage. We first discovered the little gem on a demo disc. Haunted PS1 2021 if you're looking for the fits. It's part of a community that makes games inspired by the PS1 era, a time in which lacking fidelity only added to the terror. So of course nostalgia will grip these devs forever. And in my opinion, horror is all the better for their endeavor. I must warn you now though, this video is rather tame. These are not the kid gloves you should expect from the game. Flashing lights, sudden loud noises, transphobia, suicide, recreational drug use, blood, gore, animal death. That's quite a trigger list, but I don't object. One that deters some, but others may find bliss, as some do when reflected by the darkness. RPG Maker games can be very unique, and Outcry's mechanics are delicious, and the art assets neat. For those who have anxiety, you may see yourselves. It surprised us this game had battles. I bet you can't guess what else. A survival horror approach to every encounter. Your character doesn't want to fight. In this game, fleeing is power. Even when you hear the chorus of birds shriek, "Coward, coward, coward."
The sour taste in one's mouth when you realize your life has gone south is something relatable for many queer people. We've been demonized as evil so much it's hard to not believe it. Some stay in the closet, thinking they're hiding away the darkness. The reality of queer suffering, that those sometimes loved ones contort as help when warning not to come out, is like an itchy blanket. And despite knowing our whole lives what might await us, many, selves included, have embraced the cold, in lieu of swaddling in fear, masquerading as odd comfort. Many wonder, in the midst of spouted statistics about quality of life and suicide, why one wouldn't hide at all costs from a reality that's so rarely dignified. To live despised can seem stubborn to those that think one has a choice, but being stubborn is how we got here, how we found our own voice. I fear sometimes that stories like An Outcry will be ignored, even by the queer community, as something that is only upsetting. Something not uplifting, but something to be dreading. A reminder of oppression never getting better. But if we don't tell these stories now, then when will we ever? The unnamed exists in an unwelcoming world that they've accepted as the best they could hope for. Living in a shitty apartment, barely making rent, living hand to fist, relying on friends and foes alike. What they do for a living is fix computers and bikes. Not very stable for a young adult life. Turned away from family after finding their light. It's an odd distinction, being the unnamed. Especially an odd choice for an RPG Maker game. Often we see characters to project on, to become, vehicles for engagement, and power fantasy. Such fun. That's what roleplay is often about, not to mention games where you choose what comes from their mouth. But it's an odd thing to obfuscate identity. You may think it at first a frivolous mystery, or maybe an aesthetic decision, but trust me when I say that's so much to mention. But I'll elaborate later, foreshadowing over. As it's a narrative game, reading is the main way you progress. But there are also battles of menus and text, some conversations, branching pathways, and even one section I don't want to give away, as this is not a thorough inspection. I'll save you some surprises I'm sure you aren't expecting. There's lots of twists and turns, and even 5 endings. The inciting incident is something quite mundane. The unnamed was unlucky enough to forget their keys that day. The adventure starts out quite trivial. Get back into your house and somehow smoke a cigarette. In this opening section, the setting is established quite well. You're down on your luck and your neighbors might help. But then you start to glean how treacherous this could be, as you may have well faced these very same things. And this is where the trigger warning for transphobia rings. See, one of your neighbors are quite old and doesn't understand, and the other 2 are too, but they're dicks to no end. And it doesn't stop at transphobia. Oh, that shit's intense. Having to deal with quite aggressive misgendering makes me ball up my fists and hide my fangs. Some might assume that they're strawmen of sorts. I could imagine someone in the comment might even retort,
The lefties are so salty. They write conservative villains.
and I'd say save your spite for about 5 more minutes. Anyway, the mission is to get smoke supplies from the bigots who scorned at your existence. Lucky, the last of your neighbors is a friend, so you get a lighter with less resistance. Though I'd also like to mention, being they-them is not the only form of tension. The unnamed has anxiety, and it's quite significant. One neighbor in particular is an asshole because simply he can get away with it. His low-key ableist musings and blatant infantilism toward the unnamed does little to endear and a lot to enrage, especially as a millennial in this day and age. Okay, boomer, thanks for the cancer sticks, yay. There's plenty to take in, things to inspect. You can go outside and see the political climate. This is Vienna, Austria, and although
I'm American,
it seems rather obvious that the election will go in the favor of tyrants. But the front of the building isn't what kicks things off. It's just contextualizing things. The backyard is where the birds talk.
Your cancer sticks in hand, diegetic and mechanical. In the backyard, your first chance to save. A tutorial, quite magnanimous. A pattern quite abundant, as the game reminds you quite often when you're going into points of no return or even a coffin. The cancer sticks are limited, just like ink ribbons, so be careful you cowards who save every 10 minutes. Things are shaken up after your first mandatory save. The game echoes its name, catching your attention and cutting the cake. An outcry, an outcry. Will you be okay? A bird quite cute and equal parts creepy speaks to you if you answer its outcry, though you don't know what you're risking. The unnamed doesn't either. Will you be a bad influence? I'm listening. From here, the iconography gets even more foreboding. The shades, before rendered, were urban and earthy, greens and browns and grays, even some purplies. Not so much beautiful, but capturing a feeling, sometimes liminal, and to me that's appealing. But the escalation of the birds leaves quite an effect. They carry colors of orange, black, silver, hell, even red. They spice up the palette, though they also bring dread.
And if at this point you want no spoilers, this is an opportunity to exit stage left.
The birds do more than talk. They are the main threat. You're too close to their nest, but it's much more than that. You eventually get back in your apartment, and that's for the best. From here it escalates, and the first time you may face death. You get to assess the unnamed one's abode, and eventually you sleep. I see you do as you're told, though only restlessness holds. And once you wake up, it's time to fight birds. They're in your apartment, and they're here to disturb. From here on out, the game's
battle system is employed, something of dread and excitement, something I've never enjoyed. At least not in turn-based combat quite this way. Luckily, you're fighting birds. Just do crimes and be gay. But in all seriousness, if you were fighting other people, I don't think the unnamed will be okay. Your only attack is kick, and it takes 1 MP. Yay? The system is time sensitive, as an active time battle. Also no party members, just 1 MB against flying assholes. You have a bunch of skills that don't change for most of the game, but these were handpicked for coping, not rage. You can increase defense by bracing, preparing for pain. You can plan ahead, essentially casting haste. You can apply first aid. It's a small heal, no brainer. You can practice mindfulness. It's just examine, but I like this name better. But the best skill, and the one you'll use the most, is taking deep breaths. Goals. Breaths restore your MP, or in this game, skill points. And your point pool is so small, it creates anxiety. It's rather purposeful. This game has mad irony. Only mindfulness and deep breaths can be cast for free, making for battles very cyclical. And gee, every 3 or 4 turns, better take breaths. Don't want to get caught low on health with 3 birds at your neck. Did I mention you can only take about 3 or 4 packs? You should heal often, but that's what you should expect. This is survival horror, but it doesn't roll out of power fantasy. More the fantasy of survival, or losing whatever's left. So every battle is a race, where you need to think ahead. Maybe 3 or 4 turns, otherwise you'll end up dead. It feels more like real fights, more than Final Fantasy ever did. In fact, it's almost like an anti-battle system. I almost forgot to mention, you can also flee. It's actually a skill, which is quite uncommon indeed. And kinda like Undertale's Mercy, you need to wait, or weaken the enemies to run. You kind of control your fate. Though I don't know if this is feasible for every battle, though you can do it for even the most important ones. In fact, the game incentivizes that you run.
Coward, coward! A game for you most befitting. The game takes place over the course of a hell of a night. Most thrilling. Imagine Night of the Living Dead, but it's birds blotting the sky. At first, even before blood is spilled, or anyone dies, the unwanted one questions what is even real, and this idea persists for the rest of the thrill. The rest of the game, there are so many eyes. They arise out of all the darkness, like spies. and a chorus, an audience for your demise. And not only in the background, as they dot the walls, just like they would the skies, the battle screen too is populated by feathers. The birds fill the seats of a theater. I think it's a metaphor.
The game is rather short. You can beat it in about 4 hours. There's no grinding or levels. Don't expect increases in power. The writing here is strong. I cannot understate. The words really do take center stage, but the little narrative harmony of battle is so sweet and so strange. The writing could have carried it without, but An Outcry has outstanding gameplay and range. The story beats are what hooked us, but it's impressive in other elements, especially how the battle system reflects fears of fragile existence. The game includes a haunting soundtrack by Jack King Spooner and Christoph Frey. I'm listening to it as I write this. It'll haunt me for days. The sprite work's amazing, of that there's no doubt. There's also full-screen illustrations, in quite the large amount. But let's not forget, this was a game with more than one person at the helm. I'll display the other credits now. This was not a solo bout. After all, teamwork is more important than orator clout. I imagine that you might be wondering why we didn't write this in prose. Well, there's one element that had me wanting as a poem. The writing, like I said, is quite good, but also very unique. I'm sure I've never played a game with so much rhyming as these. It wore off on me, and then we tried to write this. But it's not just the sense of prettily said words, it's the meaning behind them, the way they disturb. You see, I've not mentioned what the motivation is for the birds that descend on this small flock of humans.
I don't know what could cause this. Why tonight of all nights?
Isn't tomorrow election day?
Yes, but these are birds. Animals. Surely they don't care about... Are we sure these are birds? I cannot begin to parse what you're implying, baby. And they can talk. They're too big for normal birds, too. What else could they be?
A metaphor.
Maybe that's apt. Only for whom is it to decode?
It gets better or worse, I suppose, especially once the theme is unpacked. Its real-world callbacks make my skin itch, in fact. And the vile crowd of birds is a metaphor, yes. And it's for the audience, I dare suspect.
Nameless. You do not deserve to age. Fact.
Excuse me?
Why the anxious face on me? Pathetic waste of tasteless flesh.
What? What do you...
It is an affront to us that nameless things remain to breathe. Said again, we repeat. From here on, you'll taste defeat.
Are we arguing if I get to live?
Arguments are without face. These are facts. You do not get to be it. Give up the fight, you desperate plight. You grunt of despair. Speak to me. Calmly debate terrific burnness.
No! I am here, and I won't be calm about it. I exist, and you're in denial. Other people like me exist too, and we deserve compassion and respect, and to be here.
Oh, you mealworm child. Offense taken, hearts broken. What sad woe, what sad worm.
I squirm indignantly at such bold words. From the mouths of birds squawk the ideals of turfs, as well as those who see productivity as how life is earned. The birds deserve scorn for their ableism as well. I wish to see them burn. The world's turn of events reminds us this. The unshakable value of pain and bitter existence, giving way to possible resistance, and its troubling alternatives are things we need with much persistence. One might say spinning tales is not praxis, but distractions, and I could not fault such a reaction. But seeing yourself, sometimes even before you know you're there, will prepare you for an existence of terror. Something to inspire when you only see darkness there. For the flock in our world strive to make our existence illegal, and major strides have been made to get exactly what I speak of. Stories like this endear us to speak up. I won't pretend to have the answers, but this outcry becomes my outcry, becomes your outcry, becomes our outcry, and we refuse to be silent.
Hey everybody, thanks for making it to the end of this video. It's very important to us. This isn't like a lot of our normal content. We don't usually do video game reviews. If that is something that intrigues you, then if this gets enough likes or comments, then maybe we'll do more. We've been striving to do a lot more shorter form content so we don't go so long without updates. Uploads. Sorry. And we're trying our best because even though we are not having to worry about the stability of our day-to-day life, we still have a lot to worry about. Not just in the sort of, oh my gosh, subscribe to my Patreon so I can be making a living sort of way, but also in the responsibilities that we feel that we have as creators and as people. We've been working non-stop. We don't have days off right now. Maybe we will one day. Without it being like a necessary thing to be like, oh yeah, shit, I'm overworked. Guess I should take a break today. But outside of that, we don't usually go a whole day without working, unless we're passed out. That all being said, I know it's scary right now, and this video was touching on a lot of what makes it scary and giving its poeticism. Maybe it was hard to read between the lines, but we, like many trans people, are scared to death of the legalization of even more rampant transphobia in the United States in particular. Not to say that it is doing better in other places. We'll have a link in the description that you can donate to for a Ukraine LGBT charity, so that given all the stuff that's happening, people can be more supported and maybe more people will survive, especially queer folks. Folks have had to pretend to not be trans to get out of hot zones so that they'll be safe. But I don't have the spoons to go into it. Maybe we'll save that for an actual video. That being said, me and Dusk did play An Outcry, and it touched us a lot, and Dusk wants to do a much bigger involved video. But unlike me, he actually has self-control, so he was able to do this smaller video because he really wants people to know about this game, especially as it speaks truth to power in a lot of ways. Oh shit, I think I'm rhyming too. All that being said, thank you so much to the people who already support us. The wonderful R2 Walker, Nova System, Corin System, Valued Customer, and Tinlufu. We really appreciate your support. I'm not sure what else to say. It's okay to be queer. It's okay to be disabled. And that shouldn't be an argument. Please don't give up. See you in the next one.
Oh, so I had to do that? I had to almost die? Or I had to die and be... This game is weird.